Well, we've got another big takedown that just isn't quite adding up, guys. Of course, it's possible that everything is just as it's been told, but just like the Charlie Kirk assassination, this one is setting off my spidey senses. The U.S. has in our custody Nicolás Maduro, the deposed leader of Venezuela. He's a man whose web of influence spans narco cartels, foreign intelligence networks, and untold billions in illicit funds. We must operate under the stark reality of widespread corruption that has apparently infiltrated every corner of our political and judicial systems. So we need to look at numerous events and consider all possibilities to determine the truth. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to basically try to figure out if we are being played by another Psyop. Not that Maduro wasn't really arrested, but where he is now and how this arrest is being handled. Maduro's indictment was signed by a brand new U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. Jay Clayton assumed office on August 20, 2025. Prior to that, he was chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission under Trump until Biden took over. He didn't go to Yale or any of the other Ivy League political factories. He's registered independent, and it looks like we just might have a non-controlled prosecutor in the Southern District U.S. Attorney's Office that, according to the indictment, is going after Maduro's and his multiple accomplices' assets. The indictment outlines conspiracies for narco running, cocaine import, and machine gun and other weapons possession. These are not the type of leaders that can be allowed control in our future. Low-level operatives like guards, clerks, and contractors are puppets on strings, pulled by invisible hands. In this environment of all-pervasive corruption, our primary concern must be the unbreakable protection of this high-value prisoner and the ironclad assurance of his prosecution. There can be no broken cameras or sleeping guards. We've been told that Maduro and his wife were taken into custody somewhere after 1 a.m. and on a helicopter to the USS Iwo Jima, which has been sitting off the coast for about 4 months. They were taken to the amphibious ship at about 3:30 a.m., but didn't set sail for Gitmo until 11 a.m. So they sat for 7 to 8 hours on a ship 100 miles off the coast of the country that they just extracted them from. Then Maduro and his wife allegedly departed on a plane 1 hour after arriving at Gitmo. Many people have noticed at least 4 clothing changes during this time of transport from his home to New York City, where he was taken into DEA offices. They allegedly arrived at Stewart Air National Guard Base in upstate New York and were transferred by helicopter to a West Side Manhattan heliport. From there, they were taken by armored motorcade to the DEA headquarters in Manhattan for initial processing such as fingerprinting, photos, and a publicized perp walk video that was released by the White House. Reports are conflicting, but they were allegedly transferred by helicopter or motorcade to the Metropolitan Detention Center, MDC, in Brooklyn, where they were booked and held pending arraignment. It's important to note that this is not where Epstein suicided himself. That place was closed. MDC is in Brooklyn and is a lower security facility than the FUBAR where Epstein was held. That's where things fell apart for me. I was on board with all this until I began to look at that stop in Gitmo, and why in the world he would be held in a much lower security facility in New York, so I decided to compare the two locations from a strategic standpoint. The Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, where Maduro is allegedly being kept, is a sprawling urban fortress, but it's riddled with cracks. MDC Brooklyn sits in the heart of New York City, a buzzing metropolis where access is as easy as a subway ride. Its walls may be thick, but its vulnerabilities are legion. Correctional officers, often underpaid and overburdened, become prime targets for bribery. A single compromised guard could slip in a weapon, a poison, or even a message coordinating an external assault. We've seen it before when multiple cameras mysteriously fail. Shifts go unmanned and cellmates vanish at convenient hours. This facility reeks of internal corruption. In a system rotten with corruption, these aren't accidents. They're opportunities exploited by those who seek to keep this breach hidden. Think about the logistics. MDC relies on civilian protocols, layered with bureaucracy that corruption thrives on. Supplies come from vendors who could be bought, medical staff could be coerced, and even the United States Marshals overseeing transport could have moles. Maduro's influence isn't just financial, it's ideological, with loyalists potentially lurking in unions or administrative roles. In fact, they can be protesters outside the prison. An assassination attempt never happens in the Southern District. Staged suicides are much more probable. And escapes are not impossible in a facility where blackouts and staffing shortages are routine. Protecting Maduro here means constant vigilance against an enemy within, which invites failure and jeopardizes prosecution with leaks that could taint evidence or intimidate witnesses, all while he's exposed to inmates in a powder keg of urban chaos. Now, contrast this with Guantanamo Bay or Gitmo, the pinnacle of isolated militarized security. Perched on a remote sliver of Cuban soil, Gitmo is not your average prison. It's a self-contained bastion under absolute United States Navy command. Access is nearly impossible. There's no casual visitors and no urban sprawl to get lost in. Just ocean on all sides, patrolled by warships and drones. Everybody that enters the base requires military clearance, and their every movement is tracked. Personnel here aren't civilians scraping by. They're active-duty service members, bound by the Uniform Code of Military Justice, with their careers and their lives staked on loyalty. Rotations happen frequently, backgrounds are thoroughly scrutinized, and counterintelligence is woven into the fabric of daily operations. Corruption smothers in this environment. A bribe attempt here isn't just risky, it's honestly suicidal, being met with swift and unyielding justice. Security at Gitmo is engineered specifically for threats like Maduro. There's multi-layers of perimeter, including razor wire, motion sensors, and guard towers manned around the clock. Surveillance is everywhere, with cameras, audio, and biometric scans, leaving no blind spots at all. Detainee isolation is total, with limited contact, no smuggled contraband, and no whispers from the outside world. For someone with Maduro's reach, this means no cartel hit squads can breach the walls, and there can be no foreign extractions by helicopter or submarine. Threats are neutralized at the source, which is a far cry from the Southern District of New York corruption hub. And if an insider ever falters, the chain of command crushes it before it can even spread. This isn't just speculation, guys. Gitmo has held the world's most dangerous terrorists and warlords with zero successful escapes or internal betrayals. From a protection standpoint, Gitmo excels in containment. Maduro's enemies, rival factions, and vengeful exiles can't touch him here, and his own network would be cut off. There would be no bribed guard to turn his head, and no corrupted contractor smuggling tools. Daily routines are regimented, and medical care is militarized, ensuring he lives to face justice without incidents. And prosecution? Gitmo facilitates it seamlessly. Evidence chains remain pristine, witnesses secure from intimidation. If needed, military tribunals can proceed and completely bypass the corrupted civilian courts without the risk of transfers to Manhattan for hearings. So let's break it down logically. At the MDC or Brooklyn, facility probability of compromise is quite high, say 40%, given the degree of corruption uncovered so far. At Gitmo, it's near zero thanks to isolation. MDC requires endless reinforcements, like extra marshals and surveillance upgrades with budgets strained already. Gitmo has built-in self-sustaining reinforcements. So what about the viability of holding Maduro for months or even years before trial? Urban facilities are subject to far-left political hacks storming the gates and insisting on sitting down for a cocktail with prisoners, while Gitmo silently sits, daring partisan intrusion. In our corrupted landscape, where low-level pawns abound, Gitmo's military security acts kinda like an antidote by preventing the vulnerabilities that plague civilian sites. Now let's consider the strategic imperatives. Security isn't passive, it's an ongoing and proactive denial of access. Gitmo denies the corrupt ones their playground. You know, the ones who feel entitled to consistently force their way into federal facilities, inciting riots and causing obstruction and disruption. Prosecution demands an alive and uncoerced defendant to be delivered intact, and Gitmo is the location that can do that. No more Epstein-esque mysteries, no falling asleep on duty, and no paperwork disappearing. Gitmo doesn't play those games, instead providing isolated and calculated control of the detention facility. So I'm not saying that this guy is at Gitmo. Heck, the reality is that he can be in Greenland at an even more secure base. My point is, don't believe everything you see, regardless of where you hear it. Use your own reasoning. If you had Maduro in your custody, where would you bring him to make certain that he stands trial? It's interesting to note that Maduro waived his right to a speedy trial, which means that even though the public wants justice as quickly as possible, Maduro is in no hurry and willing to sit tight for a while. His next hearing is on March 17, 2025, where pre-trial motions, such as focusing on the legality of their capture and potential immunity claims as a sovereign leader, will be addressed, but even Democratic experts say that it's unlikely he'll be released. No trial date has been set, so no jury selection yet. Just months of sitting like a duck in a prison where the mayor is an admitted Democratic socialist and has called the President of the United States a fascist. Considering the current situation, Guantanamo Bay stands as the far superior choice to detain such a connected and important target as Nicolás Maduro, who literally has armies to protect him. Gitmo will not be the subject of a media show. Gitmo is chosen when we want to be sure that somebody doesn't get away with murder. Time will tell, but it's important for people to understand that we are watching a scripted movie with many twists and turns. The takeaway here, guys, is not to get too involved in the drama. The media is covering every move and reporting based on events that may appear very real, but are way off base by design. Is Maduro being detained in New York or Gitmo or somewhere else? A handful of people know his location, and the only thing that we really know is that things are rarely as they seem.